Abs is on Twitter. You can tweet him at Abongile Abs.
Send us those SMS, send us those tweets. Give us a shout on 0214460567. We are listening to whatever it is that you want to say. 20 minutes after 5. Now, the 7.1 million rand claim that was recently filed against Woolworths after a customer stumbled and fell over a packing crate once again brings the growing liability risk faced by many South African businesses into focus. Walter Grant, a liability underwriter at SHA Risk Specialist, joins you now to have a conversation around this. Walter, good morning. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Morning, Abongile. Thank you so much for having me.
Walter, let's start off here. What are the factors contributing to the increase in personal injuries? Shall we call it a slip and trip claim?
So slip and trip is what we commonly refer to it in the industry. So what we've seen in the industry is between 2016 and 2018, so in a 2-year period, the average value of claims has actually risen by about 56%, which is an unprecedented jump. I think there are various factors obviously contributing to this. Some of the major ones would be, as a result of the digital era, people are just simply more aware of their rights and are more willing to pursue these rights and try and enforce them in the tough economic conditions that we find ourselves in. And then this type of thinking has been also exacerbated by international litigation funders. So these would essentially be international companies where individuals will pay a premium to these companies, and the companies will then step in and pay the litigation costs should the individual need it. And this is typically used, especially in lawsuits against your larger corporations. But unfortunately, what we have seen, though, is that in terms of international trends, this leads to the drawing out of litigation against such corporations by the attorneys simply in order for them to write more fees. So it's a compounded situation, where the people are more likely to claim, the claim values are simply higher, and then you have the international funders coming in at the back as well, encouraging the situation.
But you talk about people being aware of their rights. Do the claimants have a legitimate case here?
Unfortunately, I won't be able to comment whether they have a legitimate case in this particular instance.
Yeah.
But realistically, if you are any business that does own property is at risk of having these claims brought against them. You look at from your big property companies like your Growth Points to small businesses, everyone does have this exposure, and it is important to ensure that you are correctly covered in the event that something does go wrong. Because inevitably, unfortunately, Murphy's Law, if something can go wrong, eventually it will. So, just make sure that you're covered from the word go.
Right, if you've just joined the conversation, you're listening to the voice of Walter Grant, a liability underwriter at SAH Risk Specialist, who says personal injury like slip and trip claims are being made against businesses with increasing regularity in South Africa. So are you at risk as a business, and how can you protect yourself? But also maybe you are a citizen who's saying, oh, I didn't know. Can I, in fact, claim? This is the conversation you want to be part of. Feel free to ask as many questions as you want to ask. Walter, let's bring it back to you now. I own a business. I need to protect myself. How can businesses defend against personal injury claims then?
Well, my first answer to that would be make sure you have the right insurance in place. Have a good broker, have the correct policy, the correct type of covers, and review this on an annual basis to make sure that it keeps, that the policy stays relevant to your activity. Philosophy with this is, prevention is better than cure. What you want to do is you want to proactively investigate and manage your risks, to prevent claims from arising. So one way to do that would be, routinely conduct maintenance on your property, routinely check the entire property to establish the condition that it is and address any issues that you find. What I've also seen to be of great importance is, be careful when contracting with other parties. Diligently review those contracts. Make sure that you have the appropriate waivers, insurance requirements, and indemnities in place so that in the event that something does happen and it was not your fault, that you can hold the person who's actually at fault responsible for what has happened. And then I also think, just developing a safety-conscious mindset within the entire organization greatly helps reduce the risk of human error, because a lot of the claims are the result of human error. So by creating the safety-conscious culture and training the employees in safety procedures and the importance of them, you can greatly reduce your risk of events actually then occurring.
Now, I've had people talk of what they call broad form, or a liability policy, but I've never really been really interested in it. But what is broad form liability policy?
So, broad form liability policy is essentially was created to provide wider cover than was available in the market at that stage. So under your broad form liability policies, you would be able to provide cover for, your general slip and trips, but also for so many more things, products liability. If you manufacture any products and those products cause harm to third parties, that you can cover under a broad form liability. Pure financial losses, legal defense costs, claims preparation. There are so many covers that are brought in under broad form liability. So it's basically a one-stop shop where, you can buy any cover that you need from a liability perspective on the same policy, so that you don't have to go and take out multiple policies to cover the same type of risk.
And let me ask this. I mean, it seems to me like it's a, from a layperson's perspective, it's an open shut case. If you come into my store and I've got a poster there displayed that when you enter this store or you enter this store at own risk, isn't that enough to exonerate myself?
Well, while I do understand your views, and I believe that was the status quo for many, many years, what we've seen in recent case law is that the courts are looking at waivers and, limitations of liability that are displayed in such a manner in a different light these days. Unfortunately, it is no longer sufficient to just have had the poster up. You need to specifically prove that you drew each and every client's attention to it and that they agreed to it basically before entering your premises. So unfortunately, those types of indemnities no longer hold as much water as they used to, and they no longer provide the same protection that they used to.
And talking about some of these cases, though, are people winning these cases, or are the retail giants winning?
Well, that depends on each and every case. The reality is that, whilst a lot of the claims are spurious and absolutely inflated, a lot of them are legitimate claims that are made against these companies. And so that's why we investigate each and every claim so in detail, because you want to determine, is this a legitimate claim? Was your client at fault? And in the event that they are at fault, then there's no two ways about it. Then if you were at fault and the client was injured, then yes, absolutely, you will end up paying that claim, which is also the right thing to do.
All right, Walter, we are running out of time, but before I let you go, then what would then be your message to the business owners, to the ordinary citizens listening to you right now?
Proactively investigate and manage your risks. I would invest a little bit of money in a risk manager, make sure that your bases are covered and that you have the correct insurance in place for the exposures that you face.
Walter, thank you so very much for joining us on the show this morning. Have yourself a fantastic morning further.
Abongile, thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you so much. Walter Grant, liability underwriter at SHA Risk Specialists.
In case you missed